Very excited about our next guest. He's coming directly from beautiful Toronto in Canada to share his expertise with us. And I'm talking about Stevie Sarafinovski. Steve is a natural leader with a diverse background, which includes experiences in operations, technology, project management, transit scheduling, and resource planning and management. Steve has a vision for efficiency through process automation and has led many projects and initiatives that have transformed the workplace, resulting in efficient processes and reduced costs. Steve, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. You are a true leader and practitioner of digital process automation, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you for having me once again. Very excited to be here and to talk about today's topic, which I'm calling beyond spreadsheets from forms to dashboards, automate. So as Jose said, I'm a senior manager and I work for the business services group within the capital projects group of Metrolinx. I've essentially been bringing efficiencies to government for the past 20 years. And I'm very excited about today's topic and what we're going to share. So just a couple of agenda items here. We're going to go over today's topic. So we're going to talk about what I like to call numbers to pictures. Believe it or not, we're also going to talk about Napoleon Bonaparte in 1812, and I'll tell you how that fits into today's topic. We're going to talk about the rise of the form, and we're going to combine all of this and bring to you a case study of how we use forms and dashboards to track leadership actions that contributes to employee engagement at Metrolinx. And then we'll have some time for your questions. Just a quick note, Metrolinx is a crown agency of the Government of Ontario and is responsible for managing and integrating the public transport in the Greater Hamilton Horseshoe region, which includes Toronto, Hamilton, and Ottawa. The organization is currently undertaking the largest transportation investment in Ontario's history to get Ontarians where they need to go better, faster, easier, while also operating GO Transit, Up Express, and Presto. The Capital Projects Group, which I'm a part of, is a division within Metrolinx and is responsible for the organization's capital program, which includes a P3 type procurement and delivery methods. Quick word on CPG. Currently, we have one of the largest transportation infrastructure builds happening in North America. It's an approximately a $50 billion portfolio. We have multiple GO expansion projects, with 4 subway projects, and numerous LRT and BRT projects as well. My key role within the business services area is supporting this build and ensuring that we have the right people at the right place at the right time for the right cost from a resourcing perspective, but as well as trying to make the administrative burden as easy as we can for our project delivery teams. So having said that, let's talk about data visualization. As a definition, data visualization is the representation of information in a form, chart, diagram, or picture. A chart, diagram, picture that is created as a visual representation of information. This is what I like to call numbers to pictures. It's much easier for us to gain information from a picture than it is from a series of numbers, as you can see here. And this isn't anything new. This is not a new concept. I know today's world, we talk about dashboards and charts and graphs and tracking progress, but these ideas have been around for, thousands of years. If you go back 12,000 years even, you could see where they used cave drawings to depict stellar data. But we don't have to go back that far. We'll just go back to 1786, where you see this graphical depiction, a chart or a dashboard, if you will, a graph, showing the trade imbalance between France and England at the time. In 1869, Charles Minard's graph of Napoleon's Russian campaign, which we'll talk about in a little bit after this, some say was the greatest depiction or the best depiction of data visually represented ever. In 1983, we had the spark line chart that is still taught to students today. And then 1990 is when we had the MS Excel, one of the most game-changing tools for data visualization. This empowered people to work with data in tables, and then with the push of a button, provide a visual representation of that data. And then we have present day. Present day, we have numerous visual reporting software available to us. We have products like Tableau, products like ClickSense, products like Power BI. All of this is basically a result of more processing power and the interconnectivity that systems have today. I want to spend a couple of minutes going back in history, back to 1869 when this graphical depiction here was created. I'm going to briefly explain this to you and at the same time explain why I find this quite relevant and important. So if you start off here, you see that Napoleon, during the year of 1812, decided that, as I'm sure as most of you know, was going to march on Russia, to take over Russia and occupy Moscow. So as you can see, they started off with 422 soldiers. And as they're going on, this is a geographical representation as well. And one thing that you can notice about this line here is that it reduces all the way through on their march to Moscow. And this is how many soldiers they lost along the journey. They reached Moscow with 100,000 troops. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard from history class, but about this particular war and retreat. What happened was that as Napoleon's forces were making their progress towards Moscow, the Russians developed a scorched earth policy, cutting off the supply lines to the French troops. When the French troops arrived in Moscow, they found the city deserted and set ablaze by the Russian inhabitants. So he stayed there a few weeks with his army with nobody to negotiate, no peace deal, supply lines cut. So he only had one choice, and that was to retreat. And this is the yellow line here, or the goldish line, if you want to call it. And as they started making their way back, you can see how many soldiers they lost along the way. And along the bottom here, this shows you the temperatures that were being encountered on the march back from Moscow. And this tells you where, for example, at this river crossing, 50,000 soldiers were lost. All in all, the campaign started off with 422,000 soldiers, and he returned with 10,000. In one series, in one depiction, in one graph, you could get a valuable history lesson out of this. And this is why this is referred to as one of the most, or the best depiction, graphical depiction of information. That one I'll leave for you to decide. But I've always said, I mean, if they've done things like this in 1869, with the processing power and the tools at our disposal today, this is what our reality looks like. This is present day data visualization, showing the, I'm sure we're all aware of the COVID numbers and numbers of infected people. Now we have the ability to take all of this data and show practically real time data and information in a graphical representation. So that sort of talks about the graphical representation of data. But what we also need to consider is the inputs of that data, and where is this data coming from? That's where the rise of the form happens. A digital form is the equivalent of a paper document that is used to collect data. There's a great variety of documents that can be digitized. It is more convenient to use digital forms in such situations that it avoids duplicating the data entry from the paper form. So if you think about what I just described in terms of the chart that was made in 1869, you can imagine that all of the data was probably written down. As a matter of fact, I think it was one of Napoleon's pharmacists that was keeping track of the numbers. And everybody's heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out. How do we structure and form those data inputs? These are some early forms. This is taken around the same time as the Charles Minard Napoleon's chart was created around 1860. This is a census form from the United States Census Office. And then you see we come up in the 1950s, there's been a major change in the forms. We have more tick boxes, the information is more streamlined. And then we have more modern day ones. These are, I think, from the 1970s. So these are all paper forms. And this is all in an effort to control the data inputs so that when we're creating visualizations and charts and different dashboards, so that we ensure that we're only collecting the data that we need for the dashboards. So then we come to electronic forms. One of the most famous or very well-known form was the first Pizza Hut or pizza ordering form, as you can see on the screen. I find this one very interesting compared to today's reality, because in 1994, when PizzaNet was launched, what you had to do was fill in your name, your street address, and your phone number, and then somebody would call you back to order a pizza. But we see today, with multiple form logic, with various flows, workflows behind the scenes with the processing power, as you can see here, and I'm sure as we're all aware, we could actually customize our pizza with all a click of a button. And this is very important as well too in this example, because the source information is coming from the customer. So there's less duplication of data. Here's some other examples of forms. On the left here, we see Google Forms, which was a game changer in the 2000s as well. And then the one that I've been most familiar with throughout my career, the PDF application for employment form on our right. So as multi-step and interactive forms caught on, we see more and more functionality being able to be used for streamlining the collection of the data. So what does all this mean? What have I been sitting here talking about for the past 15 minutes? Paper forms and charts from the 1860s. So I'm going to show you how these concepts, when brought together, how we can address a real world problem in order to make our organizations better and in order to gain the insight into our organizations that's needed for success. So I'm going to change gears here and talk about employee engagement, tracking leadership actions. At Metrolinx, there's a focus on understanding employee experiences and taking the steps in their engagement. Provide you some background. In order to facilitate this engagement, Metrolinx is a very diverse organization. We have operating divisions, we have almost construction divisions, customer service divisions, fare card responsibilities, and a fare card system. And in order to have a consistent approach to leadership, we've come up with the leadership actions. So each people leader is required to take on a number of actions throughout a month in terms of employee engagement. And those are monthly one-on-ones with direct reports, coffee chats with staff, weekly business meetings with their teams, walking the floor where it's applicable. And by walking the floor, what we mean is we have a lot of areas that could be operating out remotely, or they're maybe not in a centralized location. So we encourage the leadership to go out and walk the floor. And then for the more senior leaders or divisional leaders, there's a requirement to hold town halls and provide these information to staff. These leadership actions provides opportunities for employees to drive change and hold each other and leaders accountable for creating an environment where success can be achieved. These ultimately result in improved employee experience, and positive employee experience will also lead to improved employee engagement. We do annual surveys where we survey employee engagement from each of our staff, or each of our employees. And if we're doing our leadership actions correctly, then we hope to impact the employee engagement score. So this comes with its challenges as well. How are we going to record all of this information? So a digital process was put in place. There would be a record of the leadership meeting. Then that information would be filled out in Excel sheets, in spreadsheets, and then submitted to a reporting group that would compile all the spreadsheets and then disseminate the information accordingly. The pro of this method, or the benefit of this method, is we had a digital process where meetings were being held and reported in individual Excel files. But what we found was that each people leader may have been recording the actions a little bit differently than the other leader. There was a lot of manual data mining to combine the various Excel spreadsheets. And there was not really a consolidated statistical output. So then in the last 12 to 14 months, the COVID pandemic ravaged us all and impacted all of our lives. And the one tangible, I think, for many of us watching right now, was the use of MS Teams. So up until this point, thinking about everything that we've talked about in terms of forums, in terms of collecting information in a consistent manner, in terms of visualizing data, what we did, and here's an example of how the Excel sheets were tracked. And what we did for the automation is we used the MS Forms function in Teams to create the input. That input then was saved in Microsoft Forms SharePoint site, and then using automation flow in Power Automate, we were able to compile this information and prepare it for an automated transfer into our ClickSense database. And from there, we provided dashboards that provide details on all of the leadership actions. So using this process, we've essentially automated a digital process that was in place, and this led to much more consistent data reporting, led to tracking data over time, and we maintain the source information with minimal duplication. So here's the form that we used. We created this leadership action tool. This form is both available web-based and on mobile, and that's a really big thing for us. We have a lot of regulations where a lot of our information is secured, and we have to access it through our network, making mobile connectivity a little bit challenging. However, using the Microsoft Teams suite and Forms, we are able to put this on both mobile and share it on web-based as well. And this is what we came up with. This is the output. This is our dashboard. This isn't a pilot. This information right now is, we just tried a little pilot with some of our staff. So as you can see over here, the walk the floor, we haven't had any of those. This group was not privy to those. But now what we have is we can actually see the different areas and where they're tracking to their targets. We can see each department in relation to one another. And more importantly, this reinforces our commitment to all of our employees. Oh, sorry. This reinforces our commitment to our employees that we will take on these leadership actions, we will improve engagement through these tools. This resulted in consistency, automated workflows, efficiency, reduction in data preparation time, and there won't be any manual data mining in order to validate information displayed, since the information is coming directly from the source and being brought on to a dashboard. So with that, that brings us to the end of our presentation. And with that, I'm open for any questions that anybody may have.
Very good, Steve. Thank you for showing that. We know that there are a lot of lessons to what you have just shared with us here. You have shared somewhat straightforward application of automation tools to get an important process, automated. Now, as I look at the comments and the questions in the background, also, I'm going to ask you to stop showing your screen so that the audience can see you in the bigger screen. As I look into that, what does this tell me about what's going on at a deeper level in the organization when it comes to automation? What lessons do you derive from this application to how you are implementing automation and metro links in all other areas of the business? How does that translate?
Well, when you start making these incremental changes within the workplace, it sort of catches on. And then you have your colleagues from say, oh, you were able to do that with Microsoft Forms. I've had colleagues from other industries as well. It seems like everybody sort of started using MS Teams around the same time. And a lot of the functionality was still unknown to some people. And we were actually going to create a project that integrated a forms software that plugged into our ClickSense solution, and that required a lot of requirements gathering. That was going to cost a lot of money. We had to go look for budget, but then we just sort of looked at the tools that we already had and utilized those. So it like you said, it's very, very simple, but when people see the ease of use, and that's what I'm hoping to get out of presenting here. I mean, if 1 or 2 people can go back, I'm sure they all have teams, they can go back and try this themselves on using MS Forms.
You know, personally, and I've seen this in the commentary as well, I think this is a great example because when people think about automation, they often thinking about this very complicated processing system, right? And that they're thinking like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna automate this end-to-end process to solve world hunger? And it's like, well, maybe you don't, Kyle. Maybe you need to take a bite at a time, as you have just said. And so much, and people often talk about you have to start small and scale. You have to start small and scale. But people don't know how to start small and scale. And I think that respectfully, I think this is a great example on how you start small and scale, because you have a process here that is not overly complex. There is some complexity to every process, but there's not overly complex, but it has a higher level of visibility with leadership. And I wanna focus on that a little bit too. I think that's very, very clever to get something that's simple and also can be demonstrative to the leaders in the organization of the power of automation. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm curious about your perspective on that in terms of the leadership engagement and really how strategic a project, a smaller automation project like this one can be.
Right, and you know, that's really interesting when you say the smaller project. It is. I totally agree. However, there's over 1,000 employees that are going to be affected by this.
Mm-hmm.
So the solution is small, but it's impactful. And providing this visibility to senior leadership. I mean, if our CEO can look on his measure sort of the leadership actions from their team from a smartphone application on their phone. I mean, if we go back 5 years, for example, that would have cost you, I don't know how much money, or it just wouldn't have been possible. But to provide this type of visibility in near real time is invaluable. And that's just combining the information and presenting it in a way that's digestible for people. And just how I explained, that's why I went back to show the Napoleon chart and all of that stuff. It's just a matter of making it digestible for people, easy to understand, and most importantly, the ability to action the data. So the way we have the dashboard set up with this, you're going to know, okay, this group is not reaching their targets. Will there be a correlation in the annual employee survey? Most likely. We've even taken the extra step by adding something called manager talking points, which our leadership, our senior leadership will have a meeting and they'll say, okay, we want to make sure that this communication is communicated to all employees. They provide that communication with a number, and then when subsequent leaders share that information with their employees, those management talking points are actually recorded. And we can go back and say, okay, well, we're sending the message to the employees. Now, if the employees are saying they're not getting the message, so then we can look back at, okay, are our methods working? You know, are they not? But since we've implemented the leadership action tracking, that was before pre-COVID, and things got a little crazy for everybody, I guess, during the pandemic. But we have seen a change in leadership, and we've seen an increase in employee engagement.
That's one of the questions that has come up here, that about if you can talk a little bit more about the reaction of the leaders to this automation, this new way of doing things, and also of the professionals and employees in the organization, you know, to this leader self-reporting. How have both groups taken that?
So you know, at first, right away, you know, let's be honest, somebody's going to say, oh, well, that's too much work. I don't have time to sit there and track every meeting that I have with my staff. I'm doing that on a regular basis anyway. But what we're trying to show is that by showing this transparency and by tracking our activities in the most simplest manner that we can, and I mean, these forms are literally drop down, you select it, it takes minutes. So previously it was a little bit more cumbersome, but Now it's streamlined. They understand the value and importance of it, and I think it's really impactful when they see those types of results start showing up on the employee survey, when everyone starts meeting their targets and to say, oh, you know what, we made sure to get that communication out, and over time, I'm totally sure that all of the employee concerns regarding communication or shortcomings in their leaders will be able to address these from a data-driven perspective and a systematic view.
Very well. So William Fuller makes a comment and has a question for you. First, he says that accountability for leadership actions is a powerful concept. Thank you for sharing your example. And his question is this now part of the leader evaluation process in any way?
Those are still maintained as performance reviews between leaders and their subsequent leaders. There is, however, a portion of everyone's review that is tied to our corporate KPIs. So the answer to that would be indirectly yes, because if we're all doing better on employee engagement, then that's all going to reflect better on our year-end reviews.
That's right. And from a timeline perspective, I don't know if it has been implemented long enough that you can see some sort of feedback response on your annual, or I don't know what frequency you do your employee engagement surveys. But when do you expect, I guess, to see some feedback on that?
So this started a couple of years ago, and it was very new to the organization, so everybody was sort of learning how to do it. And there was some preliminary increases. There was some preliminary satisfaction. The pandemic came along. We had to sort of reset, and that's what we're doing right now, essentially. And then we're rolling this out to make it easier for everybody to do. So over time, we are definitely going to track it. We have the tools to track it again, and hopefully, in the future, maybe I could come back and provide some results on that.
Very well. We're going to be looking forward to that. Fascinating review and insights onto this practice. So, Steve, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and wisdom with our audience today. We're grateful for your generosity in doing so.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Steve Sarafinovski, leader at the Capital Projects Group at Metrolinx, sharing how leadership processes are taking advantage of digital process automation in their context. So very good application on how we can scale automation in a very meaningful way in the organization. Start small and scaling. You're hitting the right influencers in the organization and demystifying what process automation, digital process automation can bring to the organization. I love that, because he could have focused on, okay, this is what we're trying to automate our capital projects proposal process for multi-billion-dollar investments. That's going to be a much more complex process now to automate, and probably not the one that you want to start with in your organization if you want to get traction on things. So, well, you have to pick your battles carefully. Pick battles big enough to matter, but small enough that you can win. Remember that. Pick battles big enough to matter, small enough that you can win. So with that, we're gonna close this session, and we're gonna close this day of Digital Process Automation Live. Let me give you a preview of what's coming tomorrow. We're gonna have outstanding presentations from global industry leaders, much like today. And we are going to bring a health leader from UPMC Health, and she's going to be talking. That's Angela Perry. And Angela Perry is a leader on strategic alignment, transformation, and consumer innovation for UPMC Health. And she's going to talk about aligning population health and digital transformation. We're talking about big impact digital transformations from a social and economic standpoint. After that, we are going to embark on the journey with Dr. Sean McNiven, who is going to be coming directly from the headquarters at SAP in Germany, and he's going to be sharing performance anxiety, how to define and measure what really matters for organizations. So Dr. Sean McNiven is the head of strategy and research at SAP, and he's going to be doing a fantastic review of on how you identify what matters most. And we are going to cap our conference and the last day tomorrow with Rajiv Chakrabarty. And Rajiv is the head of portfolio delivery of Test and Trace Digital at NHS Digital. So he's going to be talking about how are we using AI-related technologies to automate. And the question is, are we automating enough with the AI-related technologies that we have today? He's going to show you examples on how that's being done on NHS Digital, and it's going to be a fascinating review of applications as well. So I look forward to see you tomorrow at this same channel, and having a wonderful day there with wonderful experts, cross-industry experts from all over the globe, sharing their knowledge and wisdom directly with us. So for today, if you want to engage further, I'm going to be posting on LinkedIn right now. I'm going to be posting a comment under the posting that's under my name, Jose Perez, on LinkedIn under the Digital Process Automation Live Conference. Go look up my name, go look for the posting, thank the sponsors, thank the speakers, ask follow-up questions, do whatever you would like to, review some of the commentary that I'm going to be posting there, and I hope to see you back here. And for the rest of your day, whatever you are in the world, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care, everyone.